Hello, and welcome to another episode of 360 and Me. I am Kimberly McLemore, and today we're going to talk a little bit about good credit. Interesting topic for me, right? Well, I wanted to talk about it because, as we know, the pandemic has truly affected people personally and professionally. And it also has opened up the eyes of many people realizing that they were not prepared with finances, so they were not able to continue to move forward with their businesses, as well as personally it's affected them by being able to just maintain their everyday lifestyle. And it also brought out the awareness that there are many people who still do not have enough income saved for a minimum of 30 days. And I also thought it would be fitting to have this conversation because, as we know, a lot of the government assistance programs have been stopped or put to a halt. So it makes you start to rethink what it is you're going to do differently in order to improve your credit. And I'm going to give you just a few tips about how you can do that. But before we jump into the tips, I want to talk about what these agencies are, what they do, how your information gets sold, and like I said, what we can do to improve it. So if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say agencies, I'm talking about the 3 CRAs, and these are consumer reporting agencies, which are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Those 3 agencies sell your information to businesses, creditors, employers, and insurers. They do that because people need to find out which your worthiness is credit-wise. And that information is going to be your name, your social security number, your birth date, your employer information, because they want to make sure that you are truly employed and when was the last time you were actually employed. The other thing that they can request is your employment history, as well as your home ownership and the amount of income that you have coming in before they decide whether they want to extend credit to you. CRAs also have the responsibility to maintain your credit history. So that means everything that you've done from credit-wise, they are going to have that information stored. Whether you can remember it or not, it's there in paper. The other thing that they do is that they, like I said, give the payment history is the most important part, because they want to make sure that any credit that's been extended to you, were you a good payer? Did you really pay this debt off? All that is seen as a part of your credit report. The other thing that's important to understand too about credit reports is that by public record, the things that you don't want on there, and you have probably done, some of you, which may be bankruptcy, you may have judgments against you, tax liens, foreclosures. All of these things are a part of your credit history, which I'll dive in a little bit in as we go on, as I discuss the importance of good credit. The other thing that I think is important that people need to understand is this is very important. Even when we don't think it's important because everything you do will affect your overall score. There is a scoring system, which is basically an awards point system. So basically, when you pay your credit off, your bills off, that means your point system goes up. And that point system is kept through an organization called the Fair Isaac Corporation, which is FICO. They were the ones who originally came up with this scoring system of credit history so that we can understand what is considered good credit and what's considered bad credit. The minimum amount of credit is at 300, and you can get up to a maximum, as you're scoring, up to 850. The average person usually ranges between 600 and 750, which is pretty good. Did you know in 2020, the average person was ranging at 710, which is very good, especially during a pandemic. But we also has made more millionaires during the pandemic than we have ever seen in history, because people had to learn to pivot. People had to learn to do things differently, and especially in business. And their thought process was different because you can no longer depend on some of your employers. If you were employed during that time, people got up and did things differently. And of course, if you had a business, they realized, you know what? We may not be able to physically see you, but there's other ways that we can still make business and make a profit. So we had a lot more millionaires come out in 2020. So it wasn't all bad, but it also, like I said, made you rethink about how you do things differently. Anytime you're trying to get extended credit, there is a minimum score that you have to meet. if you don't meet that minimum requirement, you can also get a copy of your credit report. That's very important. So this leads me into thinking about how can you improve your credit? Well, if you get a copy of that credit report and you see that there's something that just doesn't look right to you, and you know that you paid that off, that is considered an inaccurate report, right? On that credit report, you need to go ahead and tell the credit agency that you got the copy from. Or if you're like, say, you're trying to get some extended credit and they're telling you, hey, you're getting denied because you have X, Y, and Z that hasn't been paid off, but you know you have paid that off, then you can, like I said, get a copy of the report, make sure that you fight it, because you've been denied. You want to dispute that. You want to make sure that they take care of that and correct what the wrong to right. And the big part of that is that you will have to prove that you did actually pay that debt off. But it definitely will take some time. You may have to push back at those credit agencies and say, hey, you still need to fix this. And then of course, though, whoever you may be trying to get extended credit from, you can also show them proof, which will help you move along. But you want the stuff cleaned up on your credit report as soon as you possibly can get it. The other thing to help you also improve is just paying your bills on time. But let me just backtrack just a little bit. I want you to understand there is such a thing called accurate negative information. And that accurate negative information is something I mentioned earlier on, which is bankruptcies, lawsuits, judgment, and also criminal. Those things will stay on your credit history anywhere from a minimum of 7 to 10 years. So, or either whatever the statute of limitation is, then yes, it'll come off then. But these things will follow you pretty much for life. If you said that you have been a criminal at one point, unfortunately, even if you have done well, it's a conversation that you got to have. If you have a judgment that you have not paid off, that will stay on until you actually pay it off, or like we said, the limit, or like I said, the statute of limitation has ran out. So that's something that you need to think about in the back of your mind, that if you have filed for bankruptcy or you've have all these any other issues, this will be a part of your credit report that you cannot dispute. And it's important to know. And like I said, the other big thing is just pay your bills on time. It's amazing that when you pay your bills on time, and I realize that everybody has something different going on in their life. But at the end of the day, we all have to take responsibility for what it is that we've asked extended credit for, whether that's a car, whether that's a home, whatever it is that you have to do, you have to find a way to pay it. If you cannot pay, then the one thing you can do to help you get through this process of trying to pay your debt is you can hire a debt counseling organization. They can help you put together a plan so that you are not trying to do it all on your own. You may want to do debt consolidation as well, which is a good way to put everything together so you're not having a string of different debt that you have to constantly pay out monthly, and you're watching your income just go strictly to your debt. So there's a lot of different ways that can be helpful for you when you do debt counseling. Also, not just that they're setting up a plan, they can also help you work with your creditors so that you can truly actually pay it off with the income that you actually have coming in versus just paying off things, a dollar here, a dollar there. That's not really going to help you out in the long run. So these are some things to think about. If you're also trying to build your credit history, people always say, hey, get the credit card. Nothing wrong with getting a credit card. Just make sure that you don't extend your credit to the point where you can't pay it back. So key example is if you've been approved for $2,000 in credit, doesn't mean you have to take the whole $2,000. Just say, hey, I only want $500 because in that $500, I know I can pay that back, and I can pay it back within the 30 days, whatever the amount that I use. So that way you're not overextending yourself and doing things that you shouldn't be doing because you have that $2,000 sitting there. So don't do that if you don't have to. Also be very careful that if you decide to get credit cards, don't overextend your getting credit. Don't get too many accounts because that can have a backlash on you, because what then happens is that You can have this thing called debt to ratio, where you have too much debt and you're not paying it off and you're trying to extend yourself to get more debt. Especially these types of things come up either when you're purchasing a vehicle or when you're trying to purchase a home. This information can really come against you later on, because you got all this credit, but if you're not paying it off, it doesn't really help you. And then the other thing is you have to be careful about paying too much off and not showing history of your credit. So it brings your scoring system down, and that's the other thing that I will probably never understand it. It's just a part of the system, and it's a game. You have to understand how this is done. And if you're trying to build your credit, you have to balance it out appropriately, right? The other way to build your credit is to actually try to budget. The biggest problem that most people have is that they are living outside their means. They're not budgeting appropriately. They don't know how much they have coming in, let know how much is actually going out. Sitting down and preparing a budget is important for you personally and professionally. So if you have a business, you should know this. And if you don't have a business, you should also know how much money you have coming in. The biggest thing that's important too, when you're setting your budget up, make sure you pay yourself. That means you set up a good savings plan. And still ensure that you pay your bills. The other thing that most people don't think about as being a bill that should be a part of your budget is that if you're getting your hair or your nails done, anything that's overextended that's not considered your normal monthly bill, you need to add it in as a part of your budget for that month, so that you know that you have the money that you can utilize in order to enjoy these things that you've worked hard for, right? But the key thing too is when it comes to savings plan, make sure that you I always say have two savings plans. The savings plan where you don't touch, the other savings plan where you can touch. So then that way you can enjoy the things that you work hard for every day without having to dive in the money that you can have for the near future or for the future, right? Just some little bit of tidbits to think about. The other thing that I think is important that will actually help you along the way is stop ignoring those creditors, those debt collectors. You made the debt, you have to pay it. The one thing too, that if you have instant school loans, even if you file for bankruptcy, guess what? That doesn't become a part of your bankruptcy. You have to pay that debt back, period. If you do not pay that debt back, you will not get another student loan if you're trying to go to school. So you have to be extremely diligent about what you're doing, and think about every time you want to get some credit, why do you want to get it? What can you do differently by just saving money or just paying up front versus having to use a credit card or whatever the case may be? We all do it. Credit cards are nice to have, they're easy go-tos, but at the end of the day, you still have to pay all this stuff back. And then, of course, the last resort is usually filing, like I said earlier, on bankruptcy. You have what they call personal bankruptcy. So Chapter 13 and Chapter 7 are two of the main sources for personal bankruptcy. There is a Chapter 10, but I believe Chapter 10 is based on businesses. The only bad thing about filing for bankruptcy is that it does definitely stay in your credit report for a minimum of 10 years. I believe it may be 14. Things have changed a little bit. You just have to definitely make sure that you have a good legal guidance when it comes to filing for bankruptcy. Yes, it has its benefits that it gives you the freedom to restart everything over, but the hard part about if you file bankruptcy, it does make it hard to get credit again. But it does, like I said, give you the freedom you need so that you can rethink how you've done everything, and you can set up a proper budget and be able to restart your life the way that you want to start. And of course, if you're in business, people do it a lot in business. They'll file bankruptcy and automatically turn around and open up another company. But I don't always recommend that. Bankruptcy should be your, like I said, our last resort. Try to do everything else you can to clean up your credit and pay off the debt that you need to pay off. And that's usually where I come to my final thought process, is that the key thing is you just have to take responsibility. If you owe something, pay it back. Nobody asked you to come and get the credit. extend the money to you. And like I said, normally when most people make this mistake, it's usually in credit cards, also paying a vehicle and a home. And not that they're mistakes, it's just that life usually can get in the way, but at the same time, we have the responsibility and we have to own up to that. So I hope that these tips and this little bit of information about having good credit has been helpful to you, because like I said, having good credit helps you extend, and people can know what your true credit worthiness is. And if you're not having such a good time trying to get your credit taken care of, you need help, go get the help. You don't have to be alone. You don't have to do this yourself. You don't have to suffer in silence. So again, I am Kimberly McLemore, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of 360 and Me. Until next time, we'll see you again soon. Take care.